Because Han Li's leg was injured, Jiang Tai personally delivered the food to Han Li's house and accompanied him for dinner. Looking at the clumsy Jiang Tai in his house, moving the chairs and setting the table, Han Li couldn't help but find it funny. Jiang Tai's care caused traces of warmth to enter his heart. After the table was set, both of them joked around as they ate, pushing food in their mouths while asking about their individual cultivation progress. The moment Han Li brought up the way of the armored elephant, Jiang Tai sighed dejectedly. Currently, Jiang Tai had only managed to cultivate the martial skill to its first layer but was already half tortured to death by the immense pain. He had to soak himself in foul-smelling herbal baths every night as well as suffer beatings from Dr. Mo designed to toughen his body and strengthen his bones. This method of boorish cultivation had caused Jiang Tai many sleepless nights. Because his entire body was swollen from the beatings, the moment his skin touched his bed, he would grit his teeth in pain. To him, cultivating the way of the armored elephant was nothing but a nightmare. With regards to Han Li's cultivation of the nameless oracular chant, Jiang Tai could not help but feel envy in his heart. He felt that Han Li only needed to spend his time peacefully in meditation like a monk. Hearing Jiang Tai's emotions, Han Li had nothing to say in his defense. He was also aware that his cultivation was much easier when compared to Jiang Tai's arduous labor. Han Li could somewhat understand Jiang Tai's fear towards the way of the armored elephant. As he progressed through the 9 layers of the way of the armored elephant, he would have to bear unimaginable pain. Despite the difficulty, Jiang Tai had persisted, refusing to give up. Han Li could not help but admire and respect Jiang Tai for his unyielding personality. If Han Li were in Jiang Tai's shoes, he would never have chosen to practice such a domineering skill. Even if the skill could turn him into a world-shaking expert overnight, he would still reject it. The two of them had almost finished dinner as they were talking excitedly about martial arts. Once the meal was over, Jiang Tai cleared the bowls and bid his farewell. Before leaving, he still reminded Han Li to take care of his injured foot and to go to sleep early. Standing at the door, Han Li watched as Jiang Tai left and quickly returned back to his house, closing all the windows except for a slight opening in the skylight to allow some air to flow through before taking out the mysterious bottle from his leather pouch. Han Li was only a 10-year-old child with a short attention span. After studying the bottle for a short period of time, he quickly got bored. With his foot injury, Han Li also felt somewhat tired out by today's turn of events. Unknowingly, he fell asleep on his bed with his hand holding onto the bottle. Time passed by. Just when Han Li was sleeping soundly, he suddenly felt an icy cool feeling flowing from his hand. Han Li involuntarily shivered, and he forcefully opened his heavy eyelids, gazing at his hand in a daze. Oh! He immediately sat up with his mouth open from shock, to such an extent that saliva dripped down from his gaping mouth. He no longer felt sleepy, instead, his attention was fixed on the strange sight in front of him. Rays of white light could be seen beaming through the gap from the skylight. The beams concentrated around the bottle Han Li held in his hand, forming many rice-sized white dots of light on the surface of the bottle. It gave the impression that the bottle was enveloped by the rays of white light. The rays of light looked extremely gentle, not menacing at all, and that icy cool feeling originated precisely from the rays of light. Han Li swallowed a big gulp of saliva and finally turned his eyes away from the bottle. As if it burned his hand, he quickly threw the bottle to one side before scrambling to the other side of the room. After a moment of vigilance, he realized that nothing was wrong and slowly inched towards the mysterious bottle. The mysterious bottle enveloped by the white light, other than looking beautiful, seemed to possess an aura that was not of this world. Han Li hesitated for a while before using his finger to poke the bottle a few times. Seeing there was no reaction, he cautiously picked up the bottle again. Putting the bottle on the table, he laid on the nearby bed and closely examined this never-before-seen phenomenon. Han Li focused his full attention on the mysterious bottle for about an hour and a half without even blinking before he finally realized some of the secrets that the mysterious bottle was hiding. The mysterious bottle was incessantly absorbing the rice-sized beads of white light surrounding it. No, not simply absorbing, it was as if the beads of white light had a will of their own and were fighting with each other in order to be the first to enter the bottle. Han Li viewed this extremely bizarre event and used his fingertip to touch a bead of white light. It felt icy cold. Other than this, there was nothing special about it. Han Li inclined his head and looked upward. The rays of white light were still beaming through the gap in the skylight as if they had no intention of stopping. Han Li surveyed the interior of his room to make sure the doors and windows were all closed before inclining his head to look at the skylight once more. Han Li was suddenly hit by a thought. He lightly pushed open the door, popped his head out and peeked at his surroundings. Luckily, it was the middle of the night. Other than insects, there was no one else. Han Li returned back to his room, grabbing the bottle and putting it back inside the pouch before hurrying outside again. He ran towards a remote location before stopping. Surveying all 4 directions and ensuring there was no one nearby, Han Li cautiously removed the bottle from his pouch and placed it gently on the ground. While the mysterious bottle had been sealed in his pouch, the white rays of light had disappeared. However, Han Li was not worried. As he expected, after waiting for a while, rays of white light began congregating around the bottle from all 4 directions. This time round, the rays were much denser than the rays produced in his house. They tightly enveloped the mysterious bottle in a shroud of white light, forming a ball of light the size of a human head. Ah! Han Li cried out with excitement and pumped his fist into the air. By doing so, he revealed that he was indeed still a child. His assumption seemed to be correct. When the bottle was in the dark room, the amount of light attracted to it was quite small. But when in a wide and open area, the amount of light attracted to it was far greater in quantity. But what caused the light to gather? What use did it serve? Although he didn't know the answer, Han Li felt he was close to solving the riddle behind the mysterious bottle. Han Li knew that he would soon unravel the secret of the mysterious bottle, which made him tremendously excited. At dawn, the light that had gathered around the bottle slowly faded away. After making sure that there was no one nearby observing his actions, Han Li returned his attention to the bottle's status. Then, he bent down to pick the bottle and inspected it. However, there seemed to be no difference since it was still impossible to open. Han Li felt disappointed, but seeing how morning was arriving, he unwillingly put away the bottle and prepared to leave. After all, he still wanted to return to the stone chamber to practice his cultivation. For the next following nights at fixed intervals, the bottle would undergo the same experience. Countless specks of light would fly towards the bottle like moths to a flame. No matter how big or small the specks of light were, they were greedily devoured by the bottle. Initially, Han Li thought that the bottle would continue to undergo the same process for an unknown amount of time, but on the 8th day, something unexpected happened. Han Li went back to the remote place in the mountains and placed the bottle in its regular spot. The absorbance of the specks of light continued for half an hour when all of a sudden, the bottle stopped absorbing. The dark green designs on the bottle began to emit a green radiance as golden words manifested on the surface of the bottle. The strange words on the bottle were imposing and firm, but the written strokes were unusual. The words seemed to belong to an ancient era, the characters flickering incessantly. But this weird occurrence had ended as suddenly as it began. Aside from the golden words that were now imprinted onto the bottle, everything else remained the same. After seeing so many strange things happening with the bottle in the past few days, Han Li was no longer as surprised as he had been in the past. Even the appearance of the golden words did not surprise him very much. Casually grasping the bottle in his hand, he tried to open the bottle on a whim. And much to his extreme surprise, the lid popped off with barely any effort. No way! Han Li stared at the bottle in shock. With next to no effort or thought, Han Li's problem regarding how to open the bottle had been suddenly resolved. How could it be so easy to open? Repeatedly looking down at the bottle to confirm that what he was looking at was not fake, he tried to calm his agitated heart before looking straight into the bottle. Inside the bottle was a jade-green drop of liquid no bigger than a soybean. As it flowed around inside the bottle, the entire inside of the bottle reflected a green luster. What was this drop of liquid? Han Li was disappointed. He had put in so much effort only to be rewarded with some seemingly mundane liquid. Disappointed, Han Li put the bottle back into his pouch before turning around and dejectedly returning to his room. His previous excitement had been thrown to the farthest corners of the earth in a sudden roller coaster of emotions. Although he had finally opened the bottle, he was absolutely disappointed with the result. Han Li was prepared to take his time to discover what secrets that drop of jade-green liquid held. Perhaps in the future, it would be able to give him an unexpected surprise. Right now, what he wanted to do most was to go back and sleep. For the past few days, he had not been able to sleep properly, which even cut into his daytime cultivation, making his progress so inefficient to the point where even Dr. Mo had inquired him about it. Ever since Han Li had become Dr. Mo's disciple after breaking through the first layer of the chant, he felt that there was no longer a need to practice the chant. Disappointed by the chant's effects on his body, or lack thereof, he was unwilling to continue relying on it to cultivate. For that, Dr. Mo fiercely reprimanded him. As a result, Han Li was unenthusiastic and without spirit every time he cultivated. Seeing this, Dr. Mo became desperate and angry, beginning to doubt his choice in a disciple. Thinking about his situation, Han Li couldn't help but feel wrong. However, he was just not in the mood for cultivation. But what Han Li couldn't imagine was that, after waking up on the second day, he was once again motivated and threw his entire body into cultivating like a madman. The reason for him to cultivate in such a manner was simply because of a simple statement Dr. Mo had made. For every single layer you improve with this chant, I will increase the amount of silver issued to you by another fold. Dr. Mo had seen the thirst Han Li had for money and figured out a way for Han Li to be enticed. This way, Han Li motivated would have enough motivation to cultivate. For the next few days, Han Li dedicated himself to cultivation, hoping to break through to the second layer. Every day from morning to noon and from noon to night, he would enter the stone cultivation chamber and cultivate. Any thoughts about how repetitious, mundane, or boring this lifestyle was immediately got thrown out of Han Li's head. For the sake of Han Li's cultivation, Dr. Mo had even temporarily sealed off the God Hand Valley. Even when he treated patients, he would treat them outside the valley for fear of disrupting Han Li. Han Li was now so focused on breaking through that he even forgot about analyzing the effects of the bottle's jade green liquid. Autumn went by as winter came, then spring rolled in before summer arrived. In a flash, 4 years had gone by. Han Li was now 14 years old. He grew up to be a taciturn, determined and tan-skinned rustic youngster. Based on his external appearance alone, he looked no different than any other common peasant farmer. His looks did not warrant any attention, he was not extraordinarily handsome, and neither did he have a noble's elegance. This was the result of living in the stone cultivation chamber every day. He would travel back and from there to his home. Occasionally, he would go to Dr. Mo's residence to learn about medicine and to read from Dr. Mo's collection of books. The entire valley was his world to live in, and thanks to his hard work, he had finally broken through to the third layer. Dr. Mo was extremely satisfied with the amount of effort Han Li dedicated to his cultivation. However, he still felt that Han Li's rate of progress at breaking through to the next layer in the oracular chant was too slow. These past few years, the illness Dr. Mo was suffering from had been getting more serious. He would cough countless times a day, with the bouts of coughing getting more and more frequent while lasting longer and longer. As the condition of his body worsened, Dr. Mo started to pay more attention to Han Li's cultivation. From his relentless urging, one could see the anxiety in his heart. For some reason, Dr. Mo attached enormous importance to Han Li. Not only did he increase payment in terms of silver, Dr. Mo's gaze was even filled with the tender emotion as if he were examining a rare treasure. Despite this, Han Li, who had reached the third layer in the oracular chant, noticed an underlying truth with his extremely acute senses. Han Li inadvertently discovered that behind Dr. Mo's warm and friendly gaze hid a trace of coldness and extreme greed, which made Han Li feel uncomfortable. That gaze that Dr. Mo threw at him actually caused Han Li to be frightened from the tips of his hair all the way to the marrow in his bones. He felt that Dr. Mo saw him more as an object instead of as a living being. This made Han Li felt puzzled. What could he possibly have that Dr. Mo desired? Of course, there was nothing I have that he would be interested in, Han Li assured himself after thinking deeply. There were even times when Han Li thought that he was overly tired from cultivating the nameless chant, but he would shake his head in shame. He could not help but blame himself. After all, berating Dr. Mo behind his back was an ungrateful act. However, he did know the exact reason why. In the deepest recesses of his heart, he still held a feeling of caution whenever he interacted with Dr. Mo. As time passed, this feeling of caution got stronger and stronger. Currently, there was a huge problem facing Han Li. He had already reached the bottleneck of the third layer, but Dr. Mo's stock of precious herbs had already run dry. Obviously, Han Li was not a genius by any means. If it was not for the assistance of the medicinal herbs, his cultivation progress would have long stagnated. Every time he met Dr. Mo, Han Li could not help but to feel a sense of shame. Dr. Mo had practically spent all of his fortunes to painstakingly aid Han Li in his cultivation, creating favorable conditions for Han Li, and yet, Han Li was unable to satisfy his request. This made Han Li extremely unwilling to meet Dr. Mo's gaze whenever there was an inquiry by Dr. Mo regarding his state of progress. Strangely enough, for God knows what reason, the highly skilled Dr. Mo was unable to know Han Li's progress without being told by Han Li. Thus, he was kept in the dark regarding the problem of Han Li's bottleneck. However, not long ago, the guilt in Han Li's heart caused him to seek out Dr. Mo and confess about the bottleneck he faced in his cultivation. After Dr. Mo heard that in the past year, there had not been the slightest progress in Han Li's cultivation, his normally expressionless face became extremely unsightly. To Han Li's surprise, Dr. Mo did not rebuke him. Instead, he told Han Li that he would be gone from the valley for a period of time to gather the necessary herbs and reminded Han Li to continue devoting his efforts into cultivating the oracular chant. 2 days later, Dr. Mo brought along a case filled with tools needed to extract herbs and left the Seven Mysteries sect. After he left, Han Li was all alone in the God Hand Valley. As for his good friend, Jiang Tai, he had already cultivated to the 3rd layer of the Way of the Armored Elephant 2 years ago and had disappeared without a trace. Jiang Tai only left a letter of farewell, stating that he wanted to explore Jiang Hu. This incident caused a great disturbance in the sect. After that, there were rumors that Jiang Tai's family was spared from punishment after Dr. Mo pleaded on their behalf. Han Li felt that the entire matter was extremely bizarre, and after thinking about it, he was sure that there was more than meets the eye regarding this matter. Regardless, Han Li held no position of importance in the sect, thus his words were ignored, and this matter had long since been swept under the rug. After contemplating, Han Li thought, could it be that Jiang Tai was so afraid of the backlash caused by the 4th layer of his martial skill that he ran away? Putting his thoughts of Jiang Tai aside, Han Li cultivated for a few days inside the valley but was still unable to make the slightest bit of progress. Since he was a hot-blooded male, he decided to explore the celestial Rainbow Mountains instead of staying cooped up in the God Hand Valley. As he walked along the mountain paths, the paths that he knew so well actually held a tinge of unfamiliarity, he could not help but feel slight traces of sadness in his heart. These past few years, because of his cultivation, it was as if Han Li was staying in a prison, unable to take a single step outside the valley. The disciples of the Seven Mysteries sect should have already long forgotten his existence. On the roads, Han Li met a few disciples that were under patrol duty. From their perspective, this stranger wearing the robes of an inner disciple filled them with suspicion. It was only after much explanation that Han Li managed to convince them that he was indeed a disciple of the Seven Mysteries sect. To avoid any more situations like that, Han Li decided to traverse along the small trails that were separated from the main road. As he expected, he met no other disciples, and this enabled him to travel faster with no interruptions. Looking at the beautiful scenery and listening to the birds chirping, Han Li felt that, for that moment, it was as if all that was troubling him had melted away. Suddenly, the sound of weapon clashing rang out as the air erupted with a cacophony of cursing voices emitted from the ravine of a nearby mountain. What? There are so many people gathered in such a remote location? Great curiosity arose in Han Li's heart, and no longer fearing the questions of other disciples, he followed the noises and came close to the source of the sound. What a big crowd! Han Li stared mutely in shock. The ravine, completely hidden by the forest, was a small area. Despite this, there was a total of 100 people crowding together in the ravine. There were also people standing on the branches of giant trees. Two groups of people were staring at each other, and a thick sense of enmity emanated from both groups. The group of people standing on the left side consisted of a total of 11 or 12 people, while the group on the right side consisted of 6 or 7 people. Han Li discovered that these two groups were of similar age as him. All of them were about 15 to 20 years old. A slight smile hung on his lips as he thought, what a coincidence. From this group of people, Han Li could pinpoint a few familiar faces. Fang Yu Bao, Zhang Da Lu, Ma Yun, Sun Li Song, I. Fatty Wang is even more obese than the last time I saw him. This person is Metalhead Lu. Z. He was actually so tanned back then. To think that his skin is so fair and white now, has he become someone that lives on the earnings of a woman so he can sit and be lazy the whole day? Han Li sniggered as he climbed the huge tree as he began to lose himself in his memories. TLZ. Z. The sound of clicking one's tongue. Down below, two bare-handed youths were locked in close quarters combat. One was fat but held a steady composure and possessed Herculean strength. This was Han Li's good friend, Fatty Wang. Fatty Wang's plump body boasted fists of mighty strength and a loud yell to accompany every punch. With each punch, a gust of wind followed. The other fighter was like a rat. He did not bother to block any of the punches thrown at him and instead chose to evade them. It appeared that he wanted to fight a war of attrition, exhausting Fatty Wang before finishing him off. Seeing how his good friend was in the battle, Han Li naturally hoped Fatty Wang would win. After a while, Fatty Wang still showed no signs of slowing down. Although Han Li did not practice martial arts, his intuition told him that Fatty Wang would not lose. He looked around in hopes of finding someone who could explain what was happening here. Han Li saw a person sitting not too far away on a rock. It was a youth constantly gesturing while crying out, "Hit his head, kick his waist, ayah. Almost. That's right, kick his butt, use all of your strength." This youth was beaming radiantly as he cheered. It almost felt as if he was standing right next to Fatty Wang, giving words of encouragement as his personal coach. Han Li concluded that this person was pretty interesting, so he slowly climbed down the tree to get to where he was. "Senior, do you know the two who are fighting and why they're fighting?" Han Li asked politely. "What do you mean, do I know? Is there anything that I, little abacus, don't know? Of course I know everything about the fight. Who are you? How come I've never seen you before? Did you just join the sect?" "No, that's not right, there's still over half a year until the next disciple examination, so who are you then?" This person was very enthusiastic at first, but when he realized he had never seen Han Li before, his expression became serious and even a little suspicious. "I am Han Li, a friend of Fatty Wang, who is fighting there," Han Li replied simply. "Fatty Wang's friend? I know all of his friends, and you're not one of them." The person became more and more wary. "Oh, I've been in closed-door training for the past few years. Not knowing who I am is not surprising," Han Li half lied. "Is that right? You two joined the sect as a disciple 4 years ago? To think that would be something that the omniscient me didn't know." He looked at Han Li's clothes, appearing to believe in Han Li's word. The person known as Little Abacus and Han Li talked about a few unrelated subjects until he finally answered Han Li's question. "Junior disciple, what you don't know is that this is all because of a woman. That is," the self-proclaimed smartypants said as he began to explain in great detail. Indeed, he seemed to know most of the sect matters that were floating around. It seemed that there were two people involved. One was called Wang Yang, who was Fatty Wang's cousin, and the other was Zhang Chongui. The two were both disciples of the Seven Mysteries sect, but one was an outer sect disciple while the other was an inner sect disciple. While these two had grown up in the same town, neither of them had ever spoken with each other. This all happened because of a girl. The girl was betrothed to Wang Yang from an early age, but one day, while traveling back home, the head of the Zhang family had caught a glimpse of her and decided to give her to Zhang Chongui. Using his money and influence, he had taken both her and her family, ignoring Wang Yang's engagement. This grievous news had dealt a heavy blow to Wang Yang as he had long since been infatuated with her. Knowing that there was no way he'd be able to oppose the Zhang family, he jumped to his death in the river. Even though it was a tragedy, his death should have ended the matter. But who could have guessed his close cousin Fatty Wang, after learning what had happened, would refuse to let his cousin go unavenged? After confronting Zhang Chongui, the two vowed to duel, agreeing that the loser would be the winner's slave. Zhang Chongui may have been arrogant, but he was not stupid. He understood that, in martial arts, he was inferior to Fatty Wang. He requested that he be allowed to bring friends who could help out and join in to fight multiple rounds. Fatty Wang readily agreed. Afterward, Zhang Chongui used his money to look for disciples within the outer sect to help him. Although Fatty Wang was poor and had no money, he was a good friend to many disciples within the sect, and many of them had decided to come to his aid. As a result, many had come to show their support, which led to a great amount of hostility on the verge of exploding. Hearing this, Han Li had realized that this conflict had grown too serious to settle without any bloodshed. Unexpectedly, a small spar had blown up into such an enormous affair. You are here to help Fatty Wang, right? If they don't abide by the rules, then we will move in and beat them until they wet themselves in fear. Let them know that we peasants are not easy to bully. The youth spoke without stopping for a single breath. Han Li gave a bitter smile as he realized that he should not get involved. After all, picking a side would only serve to make enemies, and because of his few years of cultivation, his impulsiveness had long since been whittled away. Plus, Han Li had never learned any martial arts and wouldn't be able to beat even the weakest disciple. After watching the competition, it would be better for him to return back to the valley. Good. Suddenly, the youth cried out loud. Upon hearing the youth, Han Li turned his head back to look at the fight. As it turns out, Fatty Wang's enemy slipped up and was struck in the forehead by a large fist, smacking him to the ground already unconscious. Immediately, a part of the crowd cheered in support while the others had nasty looks on their faces. Fatty Wang's face had a look of pride on it as he pumped his fist upward. Slapping his butt, he walked swaggeringly back towards his side, smug about his victory. From Zhang Chonggui's side came two people who took the fainted disciple away. Then, each side produced one individual. One was carrying a saber while the other carried a sword. In this novel, when we mention saber, we mean Dao, the Chinese saber, a thick single-edged sword. When we say sword, we mean Jian, the Chinese sword, thin and double-edged. Each of them had fiery looks on their faces, but neither said a word. Holding their weapons up, they began to clash, the sound of ringing metal filling the air.